Elsa who is Lark.
Lark.
And then there's Kyra, who is Nightingale. And they kind of choose these bird names for each other because in this world, I suppose we should probably say, that some people, it's set thousands of years in the future, some people have developed a kind of telepathy, and they call it Songlight. And in this world, Songlight is persecuted. So it is very dangerous to be Elsa and Kyra. And when they communicate with each other, they want to keep each other safe, so they don't use each other's real names. So they come up with these bird names that are kind of really apt for each character. You know, Lark is a kind of striving person. You see larks coming up off the moors, and the way they just strive into the light and they sing constantly. And then the nightingale, who's this tiny little brown bird, who's just got the loudest, most heartfelt song. And that seems to be like Kyra for me, who's a very lonely young woman, who's quite homebound in a home that is quite dangerous for her to live in. And yet she sings like a nightingale. You know, she has this songlight, she has this beautiful gift that absolutely nobody knows about except for Lark.
Welcome to Shop Talk with Writers, the podcast where we are curious about the stories behind the books. I'm Elena Lappin, and today I am doubly curious because this is our first deep dive, a double episode for a very special conversation. My guest is novelist, playwright, and screenwriter Moira Buffini. She is the author of the phenomenally riveting Torch Trilogy, which has been described by a critic as The Handmaid's Tale, but with mind reading. As enticing as this description may sound, it doesn't even begin to do justice to the multi-layered dystopian world we find in the first two volumes, Songlight and Torchfire, where it is forbidden to be and to feel free. Enjoy part one and do come back for more this Friday, or binge listen to both episodes anytime you like. Here's Moira Buffini reading from Torchlight.
My name is Moira Buffini, and this is the prologue from Torchfire, which follows on from my book Songlight and is the second book of the Torch Trilogy. Lark. Lying with my mother in the bottom of a boat, a half dream, half memory comes. I am a tiny girl again in my parents' bed. The four of us are curled in a heap. My brother Piper, a year older, his long legs and boyish feet digging into me. My pa, his big sea worker's arms stretching over us both. And Ma, curlew crane. She gives me a slow smile like a beam from her soul. And Pa says my name. Elsa. I hear it in my core. I am warm and safe in my dream memory, and I fight against waking, but the cold creeps in. I feel the motion of the waves, hear the low whir of the boat's turbine. The battery hums underneath me, powering us south. I remember. We are on our way to Brightlingham, four of us, fleeing on the waves. Ma, Heron McCain, Jan Zeru, whose true name is Kingfisher, and me. Piper is not here, nor Pa neither. Our family is split by war and death. Pa only lives in my dream world now, and Piper proved himself my enemy last night. It was on the tip of his tongue to tell the whole town I had Songlight and denounce me as unhuman. I saw the look in his eyes as he stared at me, and I can still feel the pain of it pulsing through my body. My arm is wrapped around Ma. Her face is ghostly in the moonlight, and she smells of congealing blood. My hands are sticky with it. There's a bullet lodged in her shoulder, threatening her life. We left North Haven in a hail of gunfire, and the sound of it is ringing in my ears. My consciousness sharpens as I sit up on my elbows. Kingfisher is lying next to Ma, resting, warming her with his body heat. The moon casts enough light on his face for me to see the shape of his jaw, his fine brows, his long hair falling over his cheek, his muscular shoulders. I'm instantly vexed at myself, for even in this situation, desperate as it is, I'm still distracted by this boy's fine looks. I wrench myself upright and see a large figure hunched at the tiller in a silhouette, the moon over the sea behind him. Heron McCain is steering the boat. His face is in shadow, but I know his expression, broken fortitude. The past follows Heron like a rising wave, ever threatening to overwhelm him. He twists and looks behind us at the moon trail on the water, as if death herself is running towards us. Curl is bone cold. Her chest is barely moving when she breathes. Ma! Don't wake her, whispers Kingfisher in his low, Ailish lilt. She's holding well. Sleep is what her body needs. His hand brushes mine, and in an instant, I feel like I'm back in the fire and turmoil that we fled from in North Haven. In my fear and anger then, a roar came out of me. I had sent my songlight far and high. Nightingale, I had cried. There was anguish in her beam as she saw what was being done to us. Lark! Her songlight had felt like it was burning through me, turning me into 1,000 stars. Lark! Nightingale helped me, even though she's locked in Sister Swan's gilded cage. I will find her and free her. The dawn will soon be here, and our boat will be visible. The chase will close in. I lie once more next to Ma, trying to warm her with my body, trying to rest my racing mind. I breathe while the sea moves us up and down, holding us between the earth and moon.
Moira Buffini, thank you very much for this beautiful reading from your book, the sequel, the second book in your trilogy. What is the entire trilogy actually called? Because this book is Torchfire, sequel to
Songlight.
Songlight,
Right.
Songlight, Torchfire. And what's the third one? Is there a title for the third one?
No, it's still called Book 3.
Book 3, okay. But is there a name for the overall trilogy?
Yes, it's called the Torch Trilogy.
The Torch Trilogy. Okay, well, that makes sense. So as you were reading, I was thinking I could actually listen to the entire book read by you like that. And it reminded me of, the sense that I had when I read Songlight, because I decided we are here to speak about the sequel, Torchfire, but I thought I am not going to speak to you about Torchfire without having read Songlight. And I'm so glad I did, because everything I need to know about your characters and this whole universe of stories that you've invented in this dystopian kind of world, I don't think I would have understood Torchfire without having read Songlight first. But I just want to say that reading Songlight was my first, I call it binge reading in my adulthood.
Wow.
Yes, because it was impossible not to keep reading. Other books we read, we pause, we come back to them, or we read them in one go sometimes, but it's not the same experience. With Songlight and with Torchfire, I felt like I am in the hands of someone who really knows how to tell this story, who knows every angle of this story, and I can just relax and be carried away, just like
That's exactly the book I wanted to write.
Is that the book you wanted to write?
I wanted to write an epic adventure.
But I'm not your typical audience, am I?
No, and I'm not the typical writer of such a book, of such novels. I'm not even a novelist, I'm a playwright, I'm a screenwriter. But there's something about this story and this world that just wouldn't let me go. And I just thought, I have to write it. And it's almost like someone in my youth said to me, it was one of my very first play commissions, and I thought it was such a brilliant commission. He said, write the play you think no one would commission. And I just thought that was an absolutely brilliant provocation. And I gave myself the same provocation when I started writing these books. I thought, what is the story no one would commission me to write? And it's this.
I actually think that novelists should follow the same principle. What is the story I really want to write? Not giving a damn about what publicists might think, what publishers, agents in particular might think. Do it because I feel it necessary. That's what I really want to do. And when you really want to write something, people listen, and it's their story too. That's what I think you've done here.
Yes, I think a novelist friend recently talked about one of her books being her heart song, and I think this is my heart song.
This is it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. There's so much to unpack here. I'd like to actually step out of this world for a moment and speak to you about something you've written in the introduction to your book of plays, also published by Faber. And in your introduction to volume 1 of your plays, there's volume 1 and volume 2. I don't know if there's also 3, but I have 2. You describe an encounter with a man, with a novelist, at a time when you were only a playwright. And the conversation is based on the idea that he despises what playwrights do, maybe, or keeps, being a novelist on a very high pedestal. And you don't like this situation, and you then give an example of what you would do as a novelist if you described that encounter. You could go inside, you could describe what you look like and how you felt, and you could do this over a whole number of pages. But in a play, you would just have the dialogue and the place where it takes place, and that would be enough.
There's something beautifully distilled about writing drama.
Yes.
But
have you changed? Has your opinion changed since then? Because you are now a novelist.
I am now a novelist. I mean, who would have thought? And I remember that conversation, and I remember writing that as well. And he was rather a snooty kind of novelist. It was very much a sort of, I write literary fiction. It was that kind of a guy. And I just thought, well, don't look down your nose at someone else's chosen art form. I loved writing plays, I think, and I do still. And everything that I said in that introduction, that when I was young, plays were the way that I accessed philosophy, politics, political courage, and poetry.
And passion, you mentioned.
And passion. Yeah, and passion. The plays are amazing, and they are so distilled. And they're what the other superb and marvellous thing about plays is that they are, of course, live. And they do, of course, require an audience. That plays bring us together. Plays actually bring human beings together into the same space. And we are collectively told a story, that involves a lot of people. It involves not just the playwright.
Of course.
We're just one in a team. And that's why I think plays are so superb. And I haven't stopped writing them. I'm writing one at the moment alongside book 3. So I will always come back to plays, I think. But the discovery of novels has been a really wonderful thing. I have absolutely loved it. I think the intimacy of writing a novel is what has really surprised me. that it's as if you are talking one person to another, and you're telling a story in a very, very intimate way. Plays are big and they're public, and you always imagine when you're writing that you are writing for people, not just one person. But with the novel, I felt it's so intimate.
At the same time, though, when a novel reaches a huge number of readers, it's not that intimate. I mean, in the paperback of Songlight and in the proof that I have of, and probably inside, the hard copy or paperback of Torchfire, there are so many readers' reviews. So readers, many, many, many readers, I don't have the numbers, but they have fallen in love with those books. And I think it may feel intimate because it's just you and the story and everything pours out of you, but it then has a life of its own, doesn't it?
It does have a life of its own.
But in a different way from plays.
In a different way, and film and television again, they have lives of their own in a different way. But yes, you write something, and you send it off into the world, and then you have absolutely no control whatsoever of what happens to it.
And Moira, would you say that your experience as a screenwriter, as a, writing for film, writing for television, writing for writing plays as a playwright, has that experience, that knowledge, that feel for how to create a situation and put a person in that situation and make them express what needs to be said in that moment, has your experience of doing that in that other sphere of writing plays and for film and for TV informed or helped you at all in doing it?
Most certainly.
In fiction?
Most certainly. And I'm very glad I did it this way round. I think it's possibly harder to go from being a novelist to being a dramatist, because you've had the expansiveness, you've had the kind of, the sort of freedom, if you like, and then there are parameters that you've never had to obey before, like time, for example. You've only got 2 hours to tell this story, and the practicalities of budget. Like you can't have 7 characters. You can only have 5 because the theatre can only afford to hire 5 actors, for example. And at the moment, in the state of theatre, it's more likely to be 3 or 4 if you're lucky. So there are all these parameters that novelists don't tend to have to deal with. Coming the other way from a very disciplined, sort of distilled kind of form into writing prose and world creation, I think most specifically where your imagination can really run riot. I am so glad I learned all the rules of drama and of structure and of, storytelling, and then discovered that the expansiveness of prose and the detail, what we don't have is the ability to stay in the detail of a scene for as long as we would like. I remember adapting Jane Eyre, and I think there was one scene, it was one of the scenes where Jane and Rochester are in front of the fire. And this conversation goes on, I think, for 12 pages. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've somehow got to distill this down to a page and a half or 2 pages at the most, because in screen time, that's really long. And you think, how am I going to do this? How am I going to pull this acreage of dialogue and this sort of plethora of detail down into something that can be shot in under a day, So you just really learn how to be very, very sort of you try and get everything that's in those sort of 12 to 15 pages, and you just distill it into its finest jewels, I think, and then represent it in a different way. And to help you do that, if you're lucky, and I was, you have amazing actors and a fantastic creative team that delivers it in a way that you could in a way you better than you hoped for, you know. So the marvelous collaboration of screenwriting is something I'm very glad I did, and I think that's the thing I find hard. Great things about being a novelist. The thing I find hard is the solitude. I really, really miss the team.
The reason I thought of your experience as a playwright when reading these books is because each of your characters, and in fact, each chapter is named for a character who is speaking in first person. And they seem to be almost on a stage of their own, describing in first person always what happens to them, what they've experienced, what they've seen. They're part of that world that you are writing about. But it's always first person. And I thought, this is so simple and yet so brilliant. It's almost as if a Disney character like Moana was suddenly, instead of being presented as a character who, you know, does this or that, or Superwoman or so, but if we had them in first person, and they actually said, I feel this, I see this, I do this, I plan on doing this. Yes. It would be completely different.
Yes.
And this is kind of what we get here. Every single character, we get them from the point of view.
Not just in first person, in present tense.
In present tense, exactly. First person, present tense, it's happening right now.
This is action happening.
Yes.
And I think that definitely is something I've taken from my life as a dramatist.
Absolutely.
You know, this is action happening. And I'm not sure I could write in any other way, like to be that sort of, do you say omniscient or omnipotent narrator? I
Both.
Can't remember which, but that
omniscient,
kind of,
it would be.
Yeah, that kind of figure who is outside all the characters. I'm not sure that would come very easily.
You're very much inside all of them in a very convincing way. And this brings me to my next question, really, which is, do you have any favorites among you? Let's talk about your characters to begin with, before we even dive into who you might like less or more. The key characters are the two girls initially,
Yes.
Elsa / Lark.
Elsa and who is Lark. And then there's Kyra, who is Nightingale. And they kind of choose these bird names for each other because in this world, I suppose we should probably say, that some people, it's set thousands of years in the future. Some people have developed a kind of telepathy, and they call it Songlight. And in this world, Songlight is persecuted. So it is very dangerous to be Elsa and Kyra. And when they communicate with each other, they want to keep each other safe, so they don't use each other's real names. So they come up with these bird names that are kind of really apt for each character. You know, Lark is a kind of striving person. You see larks coming up off the moors, and the way they just strive into the light, and they sing constantly. And then the Nightingale, who's this tiny little brown bird, who's just got the loudest, most heartfelt song. And that seems to be like Kyra for me, who's a very lonely young woman, who's quite homebound in a home that is quite dangerous for her to live in. And yet she sings like a nightingale. You know, she has this Songlight, she has this beautiful gift that absolutely nobody knows about except for Lark.
You mentioned that they communicate via what you call Songlight, which is telepathic
Yeah.
communication. I was really struck by how you acknowledge that some of the core ideas of your of this novel, of this trilogy, are based or somehow founded in a book that you loved as a young teen.
Yes.
And that is this book. I actually brought it here, by John Wyndham, The Chrysalids.
The Chrysalids, yes.
And this is a book that was published in the 50s, or written in the 50s originally.
Yes.
I was wondering, well, so when did you read this book, actually?
I read this book when I was about 14. We studied it in school.
Did you?
I think just in English. It was, I think, year 9. And it sort of, I was fascinated by it. I'd never read anything set in the future, in a speculative future before. And it's very much a Cold War novel.
Yeah.
It was very much a novel about the time it was written in. So it's both set in the future and about what was by then the past. And it just blew my mind. I found it frightening. I found the ideas in it so interesting. It touches on eugenics. It's definitely a warning about the arms race. And yet it's also an adventure story about young people who have this quite magical quality of telepathy. And I was also really struck by that, because I think since I was a really small child, I loved stories about kids who had telepathy. There was this program on telly called The Tomorrow People, and I so desperately wanted to be a tomorrow person when I was a little girl, because they could read each other's minds, and I just thought, well, that's just incredible. They could communicate with each other. So I think it's the combination of all those things that really drew me to that book, and I kind of carried it through life. I think that book sort of in my back pocket, and I'd kind of read it every 15 years or so.
Did you read it differently as you grew older?
Yeah, differently every time. And I always have sort of wondered, what would I do with that same set of ingredients? And that wonder began to just get bigger and bigger. And then it was around the beginning of lockdown when all of my drama work suddenly overnight just vanished. I had a play in rehearsal that went. I had a TV show in production that went. And I just thought, well, maybe now's the time. I had this feeling in such a very unsettling time that it would be quite good to write about the future and to write about love and light and human connection in a time when we were all so isolated from one another.
I love how Songlight is a secret power. It is something to be persecuted for. It is something to use to fight for freedom for. It's a liberating thing if you use it, but it can also be used by nefarious characters in a bad way, or someone who controls someone with that power. It is incredibly intricate, this world building. I love how I would describe what you've done in these books in relation to John Wyndham's fictional world as a kind of sampling that goes on in hip hop, for example.
That's a really nice way to look at it. That's an absolutely lovely way to look at it.
Because it's not, it's
a homage.
Exactly. And it's such a creative way of using an element you love and using it in your own way, bringing it back into new writing, relevant today in your own story, a story of your own imagination, but very much linked and easily linked to this book that you admire. And I think it's a great way of bringing this book back into our attention today.
Yeah. I think
it was thanks to you that I opened The Chrysalids, John Wyndham's book, and I just the first sentence. When I was quite small, I would sometimes dream of a city, which was strange because it began before I even knew what a city was. I need nothing more than that, because that is such a childhood imagination thing to do. Imagine something we've never seen, and yet it is so familiar. How come we can imagine it so precisely? Is it like a dream? Is it something that we can maybe paint or draw from directly from our imagination? Or does it have a reality somewhere that we can connect with? And I think in childhood and in adolescence, we have that freedom to imagine that. And you've done that. You've kind of gone back by writing this trilogy. You've gone back to that freedom of imagining a world as a child or as an adolescent. Did it feel very free to you?
It felt very free, and it's still a world I love to be in.
When you write it.
Yeah, it was so much fun to invent. Even though it's a really dark dystopia, it was so much fun to invent. And it's got bigger as well. I mean, in Songlight, I started in a village, and I think that's what made it sort of easy. I started in a village, then I went to the city, then I went across the sea to the country next door. Now in Torchfire, it kind of goes global. And that city, that's the city in the chrysalids. And the city in the chrysalids, because I knew about this city in the chrysalids. It's really, really important in the chrysalids. And I thought, what is that city in my book? And so I came up with the Sealanders, who we meet in Torchfire. Torchfire, after the prologue, we meet a young woman who's on an airship, and she's kind of flying across the globe from this incredible city, which is somewhere in the southern hemisphere. And all the way through Songlight, we've heard that Nightingale has dreams about a city. And she tries to sketch it in her sketchbook. And right at the beginning of Torchfire, we realise that Petra has heard Nightingale. And then these three young women become increasingly connected. And that connection between them between these three quite powerless people, is just sort of has an effect on all of their lives and all of their societies. And you know, there's a lot talked about fantasy at the moment. And yes, this is a fantasy, and yes, it's got all the elements of a fantasy novel, but it's also a political fantasy. This is definitely a book about young women standing up to power.
Completely, and together, and each one on her own can do so much, but together they figure out a way of connecting with each other in different parts of the world, and that gives them more power. So we have the girls that we've just covered, but we have some fascinating male characters as well.
Yeah.
So we have Elsa's brother,
Piper,
who is gay, and that's also forbidden in their world. And he tries not to be. He tries to conform and ultimately fails. I don't know if I should say that. We have my favorite. Who do you think my favorite is?
It's Rye.
Of course.
It has to be Rye.
It is Rye. Rye is somehow the most natural, swearing character who, no matter what happens to him, he doesn't feel in any way a part of an unfamiliar world. He seems like a guy I could meet today and really get on with and have a great time with. He's very real. He almost seems out of place in this strange world, and yet he has Songlight And he is, I just said he has Songlight. You know why I just said he has Songlight? Because I am completely, I've completely absorbed this world. And to the point of thinking, do I have Songlight? Could I communicate with someone telepathically? Could I figure out what someone is feeling without saying it? And actually, in a way, we do, don't we?
I think we do all
we
the
use
time.
Intuition. What else?
Yeah, I think we use intuition. We use empathy.
Yeah,
I think we can
music.
And I think that connectedness of music. That's why it's called Songlight. You know, the part in our brain that remembers song and sings is much, much older than our language center. Like, we were singing long before we were speaking, you know, which I think is wonderful. I think it's really, it just goes to the root of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
So song is really is a sort of central human thing, and then light as well. I just think we've all dreamt or imagined that we're outside our own bodies. I think we do it all the time.
Exactly.
You know,
it's
I
not
think
that
our
weird.
spirits
Yes.
feel light.
Yes.
I think there's a lightness to us.
Exactly.
And I think in art, our spirits are represented as light, you know. So I think those are the kind of side of humanity that's the kind of mysterious edge, if you like. And that's really what this explores, and again our unshakable desire to communicate, you know.
Well, a fascinating character is Lady Swan, or
Sister Swan.
What is her first name?
Zara.
Yes,
Yeah.
I forgot his first name. It's not used that often.
Zara Swan.
Could you give me a take on her?
Zara Swan is, I guess, she's the antagonist of the novel, but she's a complicated antagonist, and I thought that's really important. I think Swan she's the kind of propagandist for the regime that is in control of Brightland.
Yes, she's the Goebbels, isn't she?
Yeah, she's the Goebbels. She's the minister of public enlightenment.
Eventually.
That's what she eventually becomes in book 2.
But first she's a raped woman.
Yeah, but she's an abused child, actually. That when she's 16, her Songlight is discovered, and her path to power is very, very traumatic. And that is what kind of forms and shapes her. She's learnt to walk those corridors of power. But her model of behaviour is the kind of patriarchy that runs Brightland. That's what she's learnt from, and that's kind of what she's taken into herself, and it's kind of what she is, you know. So Swan has been surrounded by bullies, so of course Swan is a bully, you know. Swan...
But what a seductive one.
Oh, and what a survivor. You know, like, it's funny, you know, on the days when I know, okay, it's Swan today, I've got a Swan chapter. It's like the other characters kind of come so easily. It's like Rye. It's just like, it's Rye. He's so straightforward. It's just like, it's like a delight. Swan, it's like, I sort of almost have to brace myself, have to take in a big breath and go, okay, this, and rethink my whole moral universe. You know, I'm just not in the same moral universe as any of the other characters at all. And she's the one who probably takes most rewriting because she's so mercurial, you know.
Yes, she's very unpredictable.
Yeah.
She keeps the reader on my toes.
Yeah.
And I never know which way she'll turn. Will she do something truly evil, or will she suddenly be an angel?
The interesting thing is, neither do I.
Thank you.
That's the great fun about writing this, is that I kind of know where I'm going. I know the sort of big tent poles of, okay, this is what we're heading towards. But often I don't know the detail. And sometimes I've planned for a character to do something and they will not do it. And other times a character does something that completely takes me by surprise.
Can you think of any example of that?
Well, I thought Piper might betray his sister, and he's on the point of it, and I couldn't get him to say the words. Piper couldn't do it. He couldn't say the words. And so instead, Lark takes control from him. Elsa takes control from her brother, and she admits what she is to her town. Sorry, it's rather a spoiler if you haven't read book one. Whoops. But that's an example. Is Piper would not. I sort of thought Piper would do that, and the words just wouldn't come out of his mouth. And the other example is Swan. Every time, and this is still her journey, every time it's, will she be a heroine or will she be the tragic hero, the one with the fatal flaw who destroys herself and everything around her? And I still don't know how that's going to shake down at the end of book 3.
This was part 1 of our deep dive conversation with novelist Moira Buffini about her mesmerizing dystopian fiction. Join us later this week for part 2, where we find out even more about Moira's journey as a playwright, screenwriter, and novelist. Her dystopian world feels incredibly close. I'm Elena Lappin. Thank you for listening. Creative writing can be a bumpy ride, so I was very intrigued to learn about the fabulous deck of cards which can help writers find their way in and around their creative process. Matteo Di Pascale is the CEO of the Sephiroth Publishing Company, which publishes Fabula and other very beautiful tools for writers and other creatives. He told Shop Talk with Writers his own story. It involves a mysterious cat. Your publishing company is called Sephiroth?
Yeah, it's actually the name of my former cat. So he arrived already with that name, but I was already studying tarot cards, so it seemed very perfect for me.
So it's quite mystical.
Very much, and he died the day before that I opened the company, so I changed the name overnight.
So he actually continues to live through the company and through your ideas. Take me back a little bit. What were you doing before you started the company, the publishing company?
Well, I was working as an advertiser, as a UX designer. I didn't like being an employee, so I was constantly frustrated. And I just wanted to work on my projects. I wanted to work on my card decks, on my books. And so at some point I was like, okay, I'm going to just use whatever I know to try and sell them online. I tried for 1 week, it was working. And then I was like, okay, I opened up the company immediately.
What was the first product?
The first product was Intuity. I mean, it was born in 2012. And then I couldn't find a publisher to back me up. And so I decided to go on Kickstarter. Yeah, it was actually a pretty big success for an Italian project at the time, because I raised around 50,000 US dollars.
And I'm curious, how did you present it to the crowdfunding potential, sponsors or supporters? How did you describe what you want to do?
It was actually pretty simple. It's because Intuity is a card deck for creativity, for creative meditation. So it's like it's based on tarot cards archetypes, and it can help you deepen your insights, your intuitions. And then it took me some years to realize that it was possible to build a company on these tools.
And these tools are, so currently now, what I have seen and what I would love to learn about from you are tools for people who do writing of all sorts, not just fiction necessarily, but any other writing as well?
Yeah, that's part of the tools, because we have some tools for writers. So Fabula is for structuring novels and screenplays. Then we have Edito. It's for the editing part. So once you have finished your novel, you need some editing. That's basically the main ones for writers. Then Intuiti is for any kind of creativity.
So I'll give you a challenge. What if I have a vague idea to express something, and I'm not sure when I want to express it as a painting, as a sculpture, as a poem, as a novel, as a film? Can I use your tools to figure that out?
Yeah, of course.
How?
What I always try to explain, sometimes we feel the problem is just, I want to do the painting now, and then I have a problem. The problem usually is not where we think it is. It's much more deeper. And with tools like Intuiti, you can realize that your problem is that you want to express something, but you cannot do that because you didn't feel seen as a child. I'm banalizing a lot, but okay. And that is something that you can work with these kind of tools. I mean, it's not to be taken granted, because sometimes we put a lot of effort in the wrong direction, and then after 6 months we realize that it didn't make any sense. We created now a Fabula deck for nonfiction.
Ah, that's very interesting. How does that differ from the other one?
Well, the one for fiction is based on the hero's journey, the 3-act structure. So it's for fiction. So it's for movies, books. Nonfiction is much more creative than fiction writing. So you can write, a manual for technology. Okay, something about technology, but then you can write it in so many different ways, and the structure changes.
What I love about your tools is that they are completely non-language specific, non-culture specific. Anyone from any language, any background, any country can use them and apply them to their own sort of way of thinking. I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that they are quite universal. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I always try to make the tools universal. That's one key concept. I mean, if you are trying to write a love story, or you're trying to write a story that is a thriller, okay, you need to be able to do it with the same tool. Otherwise, it means it's not working. Okay.
So our listeners to this podcast will be very, very interested in your products, and we will be sharing them on our social media, and I'm sure they will love them and use them and enjoy them, as
I hope so.
am I. And my last question would be, it's a question that we ask of all our guests. Why do you write?
Oh, that's a super nice question. I'm gonna answer in another way. I tried not to write, and I always end up there. I keep going back to writing.
Matteo Di Pascale, thank you very much for speaking to Shop
Thank
Talk
you.
with Writers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a very nice question.
Thank you. And I look forward to, sharing your very fascinating products with our listeners.